Hey everyone, let's talk about events in DBD, and specifically the problem or problems with them. To start off, let's talk about the Year 10 anniversary event, the event which has disappointed a lot of people. I can see why too, and I also think this event is pretty emblematic of the problem with events as a whole. The core first issue is of course the imbalance the event has. For an asymmetrical game, I do find it odd that the two sides in this event are not given the same number of things to do or interact with. Survivors get an event to interact with, new effects and abilities and gameplay where they have to take food to a table, or consume it, with global effects that directly buff them. Killers, on the other hand, get a gas bottle they can throw at survivors which applies a stamina bar onto the survivor, and ultimately slows them down. And they get to experience all of the effects that the survivors gain, which is a nerf or negative for them. So killers in this event essentially get nothing aside the gas clouds. A fair and balanced thing to do would be to give killers a buff for the same period the survivors get one, or even implement a mechanic where killers are able to apply an overall buff to themselves by delivering food to tables, or maybe something more accessible like hooking. This is the core problem I think that happens with almost every event, is that one side just doesn't really get to play, and it's usually the killer side. Take Halloween's events for example, when the Void is implemented. It typically ends up that the survivors use the Void to obtain fog crystals, and to escape chases or for map traversal, where the killers rarely enter the Void because it's in large part a detriment to them to do so, and waste their time. Bear in mind though, this doesn't always happen. For example, the winter events I would say are often quite balanced, with both sides getting to throw snowballs and freeze objects. Even last anniversary Year 9, the killers actually got quite a lot, with remote pallet breaking and hooking and stun reduction and stuff like that. So this feels like a real step back in my opinion, and simply doesn't make much sense to me. I do wonder what the thought process was here. Why give so much to survivors but only something very basic to killers? The issue in my opinion isn't even balance in the gameplay sense, which I know is a bit of a hot take, but I actually think the gas cloud killers get does a good job at evening out many of the survivor effects, and I've personally been doing fine in my killer games. Not to claim this is everyone's experience though, because it's clearly not. It definitely doesn't balance it out entirely either, but I do think the gas cloud is often strong enough to just counter some of the survivor effects. Whether you agree or disagree, probably disagree in this case, the main issue isn't that the gameplay lacks balance in gameplay, but more so that it lacks balance in fun, with killers getting such a lack of fun things in comparison to survivors. Because to me that's what events are meant to be for. They're meant to be a fun alteration or diversion from regular gameplay. They're built for fun, and in this particular case to celebrate the anniversary of the game. So whilst I personally don't feel too underpowered as killer myself, I still don't find the event fun from a killer perspective because there's nothing really fun for them to do, and you spend the match constantly looking at the other side and seeing all the fun they're having. Lots of the survivor effects after all are quite cool, and are ones I've been interested in for quite a while too, so it's cool to see them getting implemented into modes or events. But killers need something similar or equivalent, not just a mini clown power on top of their own, which by the way, clown is one of the least fun killer powers to face in the game. Having every killer feel similar to facing clown is not fun. Even when you're ultra buffed in this event like the survivors are, being slowed isn't fun, especially this egregiously. So balance as a whole is key to the wider game for sure, but also to events, and not necessarily in the sense of making it perfectly balanced gameplay wise, but making it balanced in terms of fun and in regards to how much you get to interact with the event, because ultimately that's why people are playing. Obviously you will get sweaty people who just play events to win, but I think for the most part people do go into these things trying to have fun. Killers and survivors should have equal avenues to interact with and mess around with the new event. It shouldn't be like one new toy versus a whole load. It's similar to what made original DBD so fun for so many people despite the chaos, and even the fact that one side was often far more powerful than the other. It's that both sides kind of got something ridiculously overpowered. So whilst the game wasn't a good example of balance or fairness, it was a good example of balance in the sense of fun and just letting people have these OP builds or characters. If that's the sort of mindset for these events, that's totally fine, but it needs to apply to both sides, otherwise one is just miserable. One thing that has always sort of bothered me about events in DBD is that often they don't feel enough like events, like a special occasion where something unique is happening. In recent years this has gotten a lot better, where some events in the early to mid years of the game were quite literally a small in-game mechanic paired with a cosmetic drop. It's a fairly new revelation to have events where there's more substantial mechanics, but even to this day I do think this lacks, not just in gameplay as well, but also in the visuals present in and around the trials. In the year 10 anniversary, for example, there's just a lack of decoration I find. The lockers have small differences, same with the hooks, but even this year we'd lack those floaty dancing couples like we had in the Masquerade. And the trial just largely feels like a regular trial with just the occasional encounter with a food tray. There are some maps with more substantial decoration, with there being a larger shrine with food surrounding them, but even this feels kind of lacking in my opinion, although it is admittedly pretty cool too. If it's a case of being far too much work to overhaul every map to look eventy, which it probably is, then I think the better solution would be to simply pick, say, 5 maps or something, and make that the map pool for the event, but decorate these maps to the brim so they look and feel different. Dress them up with impressive visuals and things that really make you feel like you're part of this event. Imagine if for the winter events NQ you got exclusively sent to Ormond maps, which had more snow and holiday and Christmas decorations covering the environment. For Halloween, say, one year it's dedicated to Macmillan, and there's decorations hanging from the trees, maybe some crate loops are literally replaced with stacks of pumpkins or something like that. Just like substantial prop changes and visual alterations that really make it feel like an event, and things are actually different. For this event it could be that we get the culty Black Veil banners strung over loops and interwoven with the trees. We have visual sacrificial altars scattered around, and maybe even a new skybox. Because the trailers are great, the lobby's great, even like the overlays and stuff are nice, but when I'm actually running around the trial, it just feels like a regular trial with the occasional alteration, like a tray of food. To loop back to the gameplay as well, I think the same goes for this, where events and event gameplay just doesn't feel different at all really from the regular mode. There's maybe one defining mechanic, but often after a week or so, people stop interacting with that even. The best example I think is them implementing the blood gens for the Blood Moon. This does feel like quite a significant change, and whilst I don't think it's perfect, I personally find this far more engaging than the majority of other events and their changes. The Void is another good example where I do really love that, and I was kind of expecting something similar for this event this year, a new separate area or thing to interact with, so it's a shame we don't have it. I do think this needs to be a baseline for events too, some significant gameplay shift or alteration, and ideally a new map area entirely like the Void, or significant map visual overhaul so it really feels like an event. It feels like a celebration of something special. It feels like Halloween, it feels like winter when you enter, or summer, or if there's a blood moon that has come to the realm. The lack of visual in-game changes is definitely a huge issue with events for me, is that whilst the trailers and lobby visuals are very clear and distinct and super cool, I find it often does not translate to the actual gameplay of the event, which is honestly just quite disappointing, when it looks so cool and you anticipate it, but then you get into the trial and it just sort of doesn't look like much like how it did on the tin, I guess. Like take this shot of the Black Banquet and then compare it to in-game with just these trays, it just feels like a visual disconnect for me. This doesn't really feel as involved and immersive as how it looked in the trailers. Like I want that same vibe seen in the trailers recreated in-game. And if it means sacrificing some maps in the map pool, or having some piece-back content in some way, I would much prefer a more immersive experience, even if it meant those things. A little subcategory of this is the lack of event character. For the previous 2 years of anniversary events, we got Trix, the Mad Designer, a lore character who was brought and implemented into the game, and yes, she was controversial and divisive as a character, and based on what the devs have said regarding her even so recently as the 10th anniversary broadcast, it seems she was cut from these events due to her being quite controversial. People found her annoying. Which I do get, I understand the people who found her annoying or didn't like her. I personally liked her a lot, and I thought it was a real breath of fresh air when she was added. It made it feel, again, like an event. A notable shift in gameplay and vibe as you have this insane character yapping in your ear and announcing over the trials, a bit like a zombies announcer would do, for example. I love that personally, and it made the events feel almost like playing in a fun tournament or something where you get commentary for your actions in game. I think they should reconsider doing this for future events, or anniversaries in particular, but maybe just give people an option to toggle her, or whoever they decide they want to be the announcer, on or off. It's not like her spoken words alter gameplay or give a specific advantage or disadvantage, so just make it optional. The atmosphere and value brought by having a dedicated character like this is so high, in my opinion. My next event problem that I do feel like pops up in many of them is to do with rewards, or the lack thereof. One of my problems that spans most events is that the rewards for engaging with them just don't feel substantial enough a lot of the time. I think this feels especially new to this year due to the price of the anniversary cakes being even higher than usual at 4,000. Although I have heard this has been clarified as a bug, but even so this is quite disappointing to see happen. From here we usually get a typical system of some kind of event currency where we're able to unlock different cosmetics from a pool. These I find you often complete in like a day or two though. Like I played the event for the first time for about 2 hours and I unlocked everything aside a few banners and icons. Then it can just feel a bit like, now what? There's the longer challenges that are time gated by the event, but these two just sort of feel a bit you're not really doing anything actively toward them, and most of the challenges in game you do pretty passively. I think especially if these cosmetics are for characters you don't really care about or play. I think a key thing too that bothers me about this specifically is there's no in-game tie-in to earning these as cosmetics. I didn't get these by doing something in the match or event, I just get them in this separate store that I buy them from. For all of the problems the old anniversary crowns had, they did still feel a lot more rewarding and engaging to earn in my opinion, as there was a tangible gameplay reward for doing something in-game. You had to go into the trial and earn the cosmetic. I think current DBD would really benefit from this, and potentially even tying some cosmetics or maybe special versions of them with a specific challenge or difficult thing you need to do to achieve it. Make there be something to truly strive for, but also offer a more accessible pool of cosmetics to everyone who just wants to vibe. Maybe even tie a small challenge to each of the cosmetics, something you have to do in game, and so when unlocking them you really have to think about what you want to go for first, and how hard it might be, and so on. I also do think a more global reward like the crowns are a good incentive to keep people playing as well. A free cosmetic available on all originals which is unlocked in the trial, in some way. For this event it could be some kind of black veil sash that is wrapped around the survivors' heads like a bandana, and for the killers they each have their base heads but altered with the black veils or entity's mark or something like that, these being a thing you can find and collect in the trials. Whilst these are small, I do think it gives more incentive to keep going back into the trial and earning these, and it also feels more rewarding because you actually did something physically to obtain it. You found it inside the trial and picked it up. I think that tangible feeling is what's missing from the events in DBD 2. Instead we have this slightly disconnected feeling store in my opinion, where you take your currency and you just go click the thing you want first, but really you know you're going to get pretty much everything if you play even semi-regularly. The tie between doing something in-game and a physical reward is important, and it's true most people do like getting something for free too, but I think most people prefer to actually earn it in some way to give it a long-lasting impact or effect. Earning these cosmetics in some capacity will mean that you'll remember them specifically, as there's a mini core memory tied to doing that challenge or gameplay thing. I hope we get more gameplay relevant rewards in the future, but also just more interesting ways to earn or unlock cosmetics in general, particularly in events, with potentially grander and more difficult challenges to interact with too. There's also of course the whole potential of adding lore elements into earnable rewards, which is one of the huge positives this year actually, and is what I wanted to discuss next. I did want to go over the positives of events too, as I think it's silly to just complain and not outline all of the great things DBD events have done over the years that I do think are great and should return or remain in some capacity. The key thing from the 10th year anniversary event is the wide variety of effects. I do love how they've explored unbreakable palettes, invincibility states, going invisible, utilizing individual buffs, but also team-wide buffs that must be earned. There's been great alterations to gameplay in previous events too, like with the Void and the blood generators, and even with mechanics like freezing palettes in the winter events. There's previously been interesting new ways to earn cosmetics in trial by doing some kind of action, like with the crowns, or just earnable cosmetics in general. Whilst I'm not a fan of their delivery in this event, I do really enjoy that it's possible. New ways to present lore like with the previous event tomes, and this time around with a new archive system, where we have these cool 3D modeled out letters and documents to interact with, in a very Resident Evil style, which I love, and I truly hope this is implemented into the core game with the game's lore. Having interactables like this is a great way to engage people who don't like reading longer passages, or prefer to simply interact with lore in a more visual way, which is entirely valid as everyone learns and processes things differently. It's also just way cooler, in my opinion. Events also always nail the lobbies and the trailers, and the overall vibe of the events is often great. As I've mentioned before too, whole event-based characters like Trix I liked a lot as well and found that very engaging. watching. Overall, I think the trajectory of events 2 over the years have been that they are getting considerably better. I remember a time when events were literally a handful of cosmetics and tiny gameplay alterations, like kicking some pumpkins for a speed boost or reduction. We've come a long way, but I do still think events leave a lot to be desired. So let me know as always what you think about this down below. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.